Hello, welcome to another episode of Gameworms. I am Reil, and today we're going to be taking another look at Twilight Imperium 4. In a previous episode, we talked about the strategy phase. So just as a summary, I'm going to explain the difference between phases, rounds, and turns. So a phase is a part of the game that has kind of a different mechanical exercise in it. So for example, in the first phase, which is the strategy phase, we selected a strategy card. So that's a very simple, straightforward phase. Today we're going to be doing the action phase, which is the meat of the game. This is where you'll have multiple turns. So each turn you're going to do one type of action, which we'll talk about in a second. And once all of the action phase is done, once everybody's passed because they can't do anymore, then you're going to do a status phase, which is a cleanup basically, and then an agenda phase if Mechatol Rex has been unlocked. Let's put that token back there. So a phase is one of the four main sections of the game: strategy phase, action phase, status phase, agenda phase. A round is the collection of those entire phases, those four phases, or three phases, depending where you are in the game. And a turn is like just the one thing you're doing on your turn, usually during the action phase. So let's say I'm playing, just for simplicity, okay, I'll take trade. Let's say that I'm playing the Barony of Letnev here. So that's these guys. And let's say that for during the strategy phase, I selected the trade card to be my strategy card for this round. All right. Now, what can I do? Now, I've taught a lot of people how to play this game. And while they've all told me that the game looks very intimidating because there's so many pieces, there's so many factions, there's so many rules, it looks like it's going to be very hard to play. But they've all also told me that once they started playing and got a feel, after like even a couple rounds, which would be several turns, it's actually pretty easy to sort out. Like strategy and things will take a little bit longer to get sorted. But when it comes to your turn, it's fairly simple and straightforward what you can do. And to help, as part of the game, you actually have this quick reference list here. So it kind of outlines the steps, so you don't have to memorize the order of operations. So if you look at the very top of this list, it says types of actions, and that's a strategic action, a tactical action, and a component action. And what a strategic action is using your strategy card. So if we zoom in here, I took trade. Because trade is the card that I took, I'm going to be playing the primary ability of it. And when I do that as my turn, that'll be a strategic action. A tactical action is one that takes place on the board, so that involves activating a system using these tokens, which I'll review in a moment. And then a component action would be some other ability, such as a racial ability, a technology ability, or an action card that uses the keyword action. So let's imagine, let's review what these tokens are. Let's review these tokens first, just so you have a clear idea what they mean before we start trying to manipulate the board. So you have three sections of tokens, of command tokens. You have tactic command tokens, you have fleet command tokens, and you have strategy command tokens. Tactic tokens are going to be used for tactical actions, as the name would imply. And what that means is I'm activating a system, and then you can do a host of things in that system. What that does, though, is it activates the system, which prevents you from moving into or using anything in that system for the rest of the round. So once you've put a token on a system, you won't be using that system again in future turns, unless you have a way to remove it or a special ability or something. These fleet tokens here, this is just the reverse side of the regular command tokens. And they got little ships on them. And this is the amount of non-fighter ships you can have in a system. So if you look at my Barony of Letnev home system, I have a destroyer, a carrier, and a dreadnought. So that's 3 ships. I cannot currently have any more non-fighter ships. I've got 1 fighter here, but he doesn't count towards fleet supply, but he does have to be carried. He can either live on the space dock, he can live on the carrier, or he can live on the dreadnought. Any unit that has capacity. The strategy tokens are usually for strategic action. So that would be playing the secondary, usually on somebody else's card. So, you know, if somebody wanted to use the secondary of my trade ability, they would spend a strategy token. But it can also be used for other abilities. Sometimes you'll have racial abilities, for example, that will let you spend these tokens to use them. So they can also participate in component actions. So let's do a quick run through of a turn. And just for simplicity, I'm going to imagine that let's pretend the Argent Flight have a destroyer just over here. Okay. Oh, you know what? Actually, let's put them over here. We're going to put them in this planetary system of Evera. Just so we can do a little more example of how the game works here. All right, so let's say it's my first turn. What do? I would recommend almost every time on your very first turn to move ships out of your home system. So that means going out to claim planets. You're not actually going to have an enemy this close probably in your first turn, but I just wanted there so you can kind of see how the combat works into the phases here. In fact, yeah, okay. So if I'm going to do that, so the reason I would recommend moving these ships out right away is, at least a couple of them, is because if you have an opportunity to build off of somebody else's secondary, such as if they play Warfare, it gives you the chance, it gives you a chance to build, because otherwise your fleet supply is going to be block you from building any new ships. Now, incidentally, by coincidence, the Barony of Letnev is allowed to have 2 more ships than their fleet supply. It's one of their special abilities, but I'm going to pretend that's, normally that's not the case. But Barony of Letnev can actually have 2 more than their fleet supply. So I can actually have 5 ships at a time in a system. But most factions can't do that. So 90% of the time, I'd say you're going to want to move ships out of your system on the first turn. So how do I do that? Well, I grab one of my tactic tokens. So if I'm activating a system on the board, I'm going to be using a tactical token, and this is a tactical action. Okay, I'm going to drop that here. And then I need to actually let's go to the order. If we go to the order of operations table, so there's a lot of things you can do in a tactical action, and you can do all of these things. So you go through the order of the list. You're not limited to just combat. So I can't just move in and then fight and then have to wait for another round to land on the planet. I can do everything on this list this turn. But anything I don't do, I won't be able to do until I remove that token and do it again. So the first thing I do is activate the system. That's number 1 under the tactical action there, which I've just done. So I've taken a tactic token off of my tactic section of my strategy, or my card here. And I've placed that on the system that I want to move to. Now I can move ships there from any system. Now I only have ships in one system, but let's say I had a destroyer here and I wanted to move all these guys in. I can do that. I'm not limited to just moving this fleet in. I can also move this guy in. So anybody that can reach it can fly in. But again, you have to watch your fleet supply. It's not going to be a problem here. So let's say I want to land on this planet. So I'll say, okay, this carrier is going to bring a fighter with him. And he can also carry a couple infantry. And we'll just bring 2 for now. We'll save this guy for another mission. Okay, so let's say, okay, I want to bring these guys in to land on this planet. All right. So we have done the first part of activation, the second part, which is movement, and then move the ships. Now, if there were space cannons here, regardless of who owned the space cannon. So as soon as a space cannon is activated, it can fire, whether it's the defender or the attacker. It says space cannon offense here, but that means firing at ships where it says Space Cannon Defense later firing at infantry. Okay, but there's no space cannons in this system, so we're going to ignore that. The third step in the tactical action is space combat. Okay, so now that there's an enemy ship in that system, we have to fight. So the first thing that's going to happen is an anti-fighter barrage. So we take a look. Anti-fighter barrage is only done by destroyers. So both me, the Barony of Letnev, and the Argent Flight have a destroyer present. But only I have a fighter present. So since there's nothing for my destroyer to shoot at for an anti-fighter barrage, then the Argent Flight's going to do its anti-fighter barrage. Now they do have this card. Normally you would just have normal dice, but I'm using the program here. So basically I'm just telling it that I have one ship, and I'm going to click this button for its roll. Oh my goodness! All right, so he rolled a 10. He hits my ship. Just as a note, anti-fighter barrage involves the fighter hit being removed immediately, so it's not going to be firing back. So the Argent Flight destroyer has hit my fighter. What's the next step? So we can look at our handy sheet. Announce retreats. So retreats are announced at the beginning of a round of combat, but they're not actually executed till the end. So only survivors are going to retreat. They have to have a place to go. We're not going to worry about announcing retreats here. We're going to make combat rolls. Okay, so as the aggressor, I usually say aggressor roll first. Doesn't really matter though. So I have a dreadnought, a destroyer, and a carrier. Now if you're using dice, it's really important to distinguish which dice are rolling for which ship, because they do hit on different values. So if you have ships with different values, don't roll them at the same time, because that gets really confusing. All right, now down here, I don't know why I have Argent Flight ships on here. But you know what, I'm just going to use purple. Just because the one I have over here by my faction has the Strikewing Alpha, the Argent Flight destroyer. I don't know what's going on there. Alright, so I have a dreadnought, a destroyer, and a carrier. And I'm going to roll for those. Okay. Alright, so my carrier... since I'm rolling in here, I don't really need to worry about, because it actually keeps track over here of which ship hit what. So my carrier missed, my destroyer missed, my dreadnought missed. Oh no! Alright, all my ships missed. Let's see how the Argent Flight does with their Strikewing Alpha. Oh, he hit! Alright, well, now because I have a dreadnought, I can sustain damage on my ships, on my dreadnought. My dreadnought has an ability called sustain damage, so I just flip him over. So in a heroic battle, I failed to kill the Argent Flight destroyer, but he's damaged my dreadnought. I could have just removed one of these ships, but because I can sustain damage, I'll just do that. And let's go. Nobody announced a retreat, so we're going to go back to the second round of combat. Now, the anti-fighter barrage, even if there were fighters left, you wouldn't do it again at this point. It's only the very beginning. All right, let's try this again. Okay, so my carrier hit, my destroyer missed, my dreadnought's terrible. So actually, my worst combat ship is the only one that got any hits. But Argent Flight still gets to fire back at me. And missed. So it was a valiant effort by the Argent Flight, but that ship is dead. This remains damaged. This system is activated, so Can't do anything else. Oh, sorry, we have a landing here. So now that we've cleared the space area, we can go to the next step. So we've assigned the hits. We go to the fourth step now, invasion. So there's no troops to fire on, but if there were enemy troops, I would do bombardment with my dreadnought. It's a special ability certain ships have. And then after I do that, I commit ground forces. So I have to decide who's actually going down to the planet. All right, so we're going to send both of them down. All right, so I've sent 2 guys down to this planet. So what I would do in this case, I would take the planet card. And I'm not going to do it right now. I'm not going to go looking for it. But you would find the planet card for that planet, and you would take it, but you wouldn't put it with the color side up. You'd actually get it with the black and white side up. What that means is the planet's exhausted. You're not going to be able to use it or spend it this round. It will refresh later on in the status phase. But, so just a heads up on that. But you would grab the card and just put it here with your home planets here. And the other thing you get to do that is not going to be on your card here is that you can explore the planet. So this is something that came with the Prophecy of Kings expansion. When you take over a neutral planet, not a planet from another player, but when you take a neutral planet, you get to explore it. So since this planet was neutral when I took it, I'm going to draw a card of the corresponding planet type. So this is, you can tell by this symbol, this is a cultural planet, and it will have a corresponding cultural deck. Okay, so I have found something called the Tomb of Amphidia. So this would be attached to the planet card, so I didn't take the planet card, but if I had, I would put this on the planet card, and what it would do is it would increase the influence of the planet by 1. And then it tells me here at the bottom, if the player who has the Crown of Amphidia relic has control of this planet, they can use that relic to gain 1 VP. So if I found there's a matching card that goes, or item or relic or something that goes with this card, and if I get both of them, then I can cash in for a point. But right now what this does is it increases the influence of the planet that I found it on by 1. Alright, so that's the exploration. We have control of the planet. We got the planet card. So what else can we do on a turn? We can do production. So if we had anything, like let's say we had a space dock in this system, we could now build on it. Okay, so there's a lot you can do during a tactical action, right? You just run through this list in order. Most of the time you're not doing all of them, but this does outline all the things you can do in an activation on a system. And once I did that, I would then, let the next person go for their turn. And so let's say my next turn comes around. Well, I don't have any more ships or anything. So let's say, well, you know what? I want to buy some more ships. But do I want to do it this turn? Because I still have this card, which is going to give me some money. So for my strategy card, I took trade, which is going to give me 3 trade goods and the opportunity to fill my commodities, which lets me trade for money with other players. I only get 2, but what I do get right away is I can take these 3 trade goods. So, alright. So this is a 3-piece. So the yellow side is trade goods. Here, let me zoom in on it. Yellow side is trade goods. We flip that over. Gray side is commodities. So we're taking this as trade goods, and that will go on my trade goods section of my sheet. And then replenish commodities. So we'll take some of the 1s. Now these stay on the gray side, and they're actually going to go on my faction sheet here in my commodities section. Where did the other one go? Oh, there it is. Alright, so these are going to come over here. So the Baron of Letnev, as we know, make fantastic, very popular leather jackets. We got a couple crates of those to trade with some other faction. Alright, and now as part of my strategic action, I can choose any number of other players that can use this ability. They can fill up their commodities without having to spend a token. So the secondary, any other player could fill up their commodities by spending a token, but as part of my primary ability, I can let people do that for free. which I'm going to want to choose somebody to do so I can have a trading partner. But I've already gotten a fight with the Argent Flight. I don't want to trade with them, even though we are adjacent. Let's say we'll go to my other neighbor, the Federation of Sol, and we'll say, yeah, you fill up for free, and he could fill up his 4 commodities there. And then if I were adjacent to him, I could trade, for a couple of his, and these would turn into money. But we'll say we're not close enough. That's not going to happen right now. But I did get this money. And once I've used my strategy card, so this was a strategic action because I used my strategy card, I then flip it over to show that it's been used. Okay? And you have to use it. You can't pass or finish the round without using your card. And you might wonder why that people would even want to not play it. Well, sometimes you got a card where it's actually going to be more advantageous for your enemies, like the secondary ability will be better for your enemies to use than the primary will be for you. And so sometimes you're in a situation where it's like, well, now I don't want to play this anymore. But you have to. If you've taken a strategy card, you're going to have to play it at some point before you can pass. So now I've had 2 turns. I've had a strategic action, just this turn. Last action, we did a tactical action. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any component actions right now. Let's say my next turn comes around, it's round 3, and I decide, you know what, I'm going to do another tactical action. I want to build some ships. I just got a whole bunch of money, so I'm going to activate my home system. So because I'm activating the system, I can build this round. I'm not going to be able to use these ships this round because they'll be activated. And in fact, even though I'm allowed to move into a system when I activate it, I can't move these guys because they're already activated. So these guys are stuck here, and I have no other ships I can move in, but I don't really want to. So a lot of these steps, I'm skipping the movement phase, I'm skipping the space combat and invasion phase, I'm moving straight to the production step here. Alright, so what do I want to build? Well, let's take a look at our sheet. I can build, remember, I can have up to 3 capital ships, or non-fighter ships. But there's another limit I have to pay attention to. That's the production value of, or the production limit of my planet. So Arc Prime, where my space dock is, has a production resource value of 4. So that's how much it's worth basically in resources. And my space dock, if you look down in the bottom right, it adds 2 to that production value. So that means my space dock actually has a production limit of 6. And what that means is I can build 6 units. So I have to adhere to 2 limits when I'm building. One is the production limit, which is 6 on this planet, which is quite good. But also I can't exceed my fleet supply. So I can build 6 units, and I'm also limited by the money that I can spend. And that is a combination of my trade goods here and my planets, my refreshed planets. Okay, so let's just say I want to spend a whole ton of money on a couple of dreadnoughts. Probably not a good idea, but just for show here. I have my $3. I have $6 here. So I'm going to flip these over to show that I'm spending them. So I've just spent 6 resources. I've spent 9 resources, so we're going to spend this 3 as well. So the 2 dreadnoughts are going to cost 4 each for a total of 8. I still have $1 left. And I can buy 2 infantry for $1. So I'm going to buy 2 dreadnoughts and 2 infantry. Oh. And while this, I wouldn't say this is a great choice for the situation I'm in, but the dreadnoughts do each have a capacity of 1, so I can carry these guys with them. Okay, let's get these guys on the board, and they're just going to be plopped onto this, my home system here where I built them. Now you can only build on a system that has capacity, or you can only build on a system that has a production value, so mostly that's going to be space docks, but there are other special ships that some faction have, or in the case of some factions like the Arbrick, actually their infantry have production. So you can build anywhere you have production. It's usually going to be a space dock. Alright, so in this case, I have activated now 2 systems. You can see I'm running out of tokens. You have to be a little bit careful with your token management because you only get a limited number back every round. So kind of watch that. Alright, so then let's say, so that's 3 turns I've done. I did 2 tactical actions and I've done my strategic action. It comes back to me. And while I don't have any component action, so normally here I would just be passing because I can't do anything else. But I want to show you an example of what a component action is. So let's take a look at another faction, Federation of Sol. So if you look at the Federation of Sol on the right, they have a faction ability called Orbital Drop. And this has the keyword action. What that means is this can be done as your turn. In other words, you're doing this on your turn and only this. Besides things like trading, which you can always do on your turn. Alright, so Orbital Drop action, spend 1 token from your strategy pool to place 2 infantry from your reinforcements on 1 planet you control. So this is a component action. He's spending a strategy token to place 2 infantry on a planet that he owns. And there are other things like technologies and action cards that will also have this action keyword. Some hero or some leaders may have action keywords. And that's done as your turn. In terms of trade, you have to be neighbors with somebody. You can do it anytime it's your turn, but you can't trade anything if you're not adjacent and if it's neither your nor the other. But even if you've passed, you can trade with somebody as long as it's their turn. And the other thing, once you've passed, you can still do other people's secondaries. So let's say I've passed, but then somebody plays leadership, and if I had the influence to spend, I could still spend it and do that. So in this game, you can still do quite a few things while you're waiting for your turn. So it's not like you're just sitting around doing nothing while everybody else is going. You're still looking for people to play their strategy cards so you can do the secondaries, and you're still able to negotiate and discuss things with other players. You just can't actually do a trade unless it's either your turn or the active player is trading with you. So it's basically it for the action phase. It's complicated strategically, but pretty straightforward. You just got to ask yourself, am I doing something on the board? Am I using one of these cards? Or do I have a special ability marked as an action? And you just choose one of those to do. And if there's nothing for you to do, or you want to preserve resources or conserve resources, then you just pass. But once you've passed, you're not coming back in. But again, you can still pop off on other people's activity sometimes. Alright, well I think that's pretty good. Just brief description of the action phase. So have a good evening and good gaming.